It's going to be like a panel debate. We've got some set questions, and we're going to be talking of automation of sterile services, what can be automated, and do we need to do it? Okay. So if we go through the three experts, and we'll ask the relevant questions, and we'll see where the debate takes us. So, first question: do we need to automate to mitigate workforce shortages? So I'll come to you first, Rob.
I think so.
You think so?
I think, yeah, because there's fewer and fewer people who are wanting to get into these more physical jobs. We've seen that through the generations. And automation closes that gap, and we're seeing the advances that's made through automation. And it's been widely adopted in many manufacturing industries, so why not introduce it more into healthcare if it can fill a gap and provide a benefit?
I think there's a case for a mixed estate where you would have automation. I've been to a few SSDs that are using robots now. I've been to various conferences where you can see robots being demonstrated, including even machines that will pack surgical instrument sets for you. We saw this morning the video system that would recognise instruments and tell you if you'd got the set correct, and I suspect in the future they will even pick up mechanical faults or certainly visible faults on the instruments. So I think there's probably going to be a need for humans involved, but we will start to see slow automation of the more basic operations that are carried out.
Yeah, I would say just generally across healthcare system automation, well, I would say automation in this case would probably alleviate workforce shortages, and if there are backlogs of equipment that need to be cleared so that the actual other services can go on, so they don't kind of delay operations and other procedures that need to go ahead.
So what's the thoughts of the audience? Anybody disagree that automation could potentially be a risk, be an erosion of the technical? Yeah, the lady over there.
For me, I'd worry about the patient risk. So it's all right saying we can automate it, but you can't take away those human eyes, which I know make mistakes. However, if a robot makes a mistake, how do you know it's not going to keep making the same mistake? And also, how do you know which robot has made the mistake? To then, at least if it's a person, you can go back to that person, you can train them. Also, are we de-skilling the workforce by moving to robots? Would it not be better to actually look at upskilling and upping how much we pay our technicians, because it is a technical role, to keep the workforce alive rather than reducing it?
So I think that's a good point, and one I'll bring to Rob. Rob, in your position in the IDSC, you obviously are rightly so pushing.
Well, any of the views I express here are not the views of the IDSC.
No, I get that, but obviously the IDSC is pushing for the right reasons, competency, skills, and.
Well, I mean, Mandy's got a fair point about upskilling and not de-skilling the workforce. But when you say things like, should we pay people more, that's then going to result in it being a more expensive process, which could make it more inclined to either outsourcing or looking to automate the process anyway, because if you're paying more for the staff and it's a lot cheaper to buy a robot, at some point it's going to balance out, and organisations are going to be looking at doing what's the trade-off. I appreciate you say there might be some trade-off with patient safety, but anything that humans do is very subjective, and like you alluded to, they do make mistakes, they do have to be retrained, and what we know with automation is those mistakes are generally mitigated, because once a process is set and programmed, it's, as we do with washers and sterilisers, it's validated, it's repeatable, and it's repeatable exactly the same every time, and that's probably where we should be looking to do.
Sanna, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, it's a very good point that whether if a robot does something and where's the human's role in all of this. So digital transformation, it will always keep the human in the loop. The human has to be on the driving seat of all of these processes. So as I said earlier in the morning in the panel or a discussion, that the humans have to always be on the driving seat of these digital transformations. So if there's a robot, the human will be overseeing the robot. They are assistants to the people who are doing the job. And they are, like digitization and robots and automation, allow the people to do the job more efficiently and like more, more securely, more, what's the word, precisely. Yeah.
I just think I'll have my tuppence worth as well, that the people who work in SSTs are ridiculously undervalued. They're underpaid, undervalued. They perform a vital function in patient safety. But unfortunately, like everywhere else, we have skills shortages, and if you can go and work in Sainsbury's scanning people shopping for more money than you're going to get for packing instrument sets in this modern age of the economy pressing down on people's wages, then what choice do they have? But I think there will always be a need for very skilled individuals in this area, but it's perhaps the more mundane tasks. Like I visited one SSD which had little robots that would caddy the instrument sets from the end of the washer disinfector to a station where they would be examined by a human and packed, and then the robot would take it back to the sterilisers for sterilisation. So it's little tweaks in what we do like that.
Keeping the skill where the skill's needed.
Exactly.
And protect it. So rather than de-skilling Mandy, protecting the staff by removing those difficult jobs like loading and carrying and things like that. Brian's made a really good point there about the pay rates and the challenges with retention for sterile services and endoscope decontamination staff. Gemma, who's at the back, will know this from Salisbury. Salisbury's a very small city, and the trust in Salisbury and the local Tesco are the two biggest employers in that city because it's so small. And we'd lose sterile service technicians year after year because, like you say, they were getting paid the same rate to go and do a very simple job with less responsibility and fewer risks at the local supermarket, until we got with the national profiles and started upskilling people and paying people at least band 3 to be qualified technicians, and that's where we've been able to move away from that. But it is still, in a lot of areas around the country, where people are still paid band 2, they can go and do a job with far less responsibility and which asks far less of them than we do in sterile services for the same pay. So it's a constant challenge. And retention in sterile services is huge because, as everybody knows, how long it takes to train up a sterile service or even endoscopy decontamination technician is a significant amount of time, takes a significant amount of resource. And because of that, you've invested all that, you really want to hold on to them.
So can I just ask a question as a complete outsider? Why is the pay so, why can the pay not be increased if the job is so important, so demanding, and upskilling?
Is Mr. Starmer out there?
So within the Department of Health, we have a thing called Agenda for Change, and Agenda for Change came in, and it created job profiles and bandings of pay that what you would do. So the levels of responsibility, the levels of autonomy, the risk of what you do, and what that is, the value that is seen as by the government. And that's why we have the structure we have.
And can I ask again, were you involved in this?
No, that's before my time.
Just playing devil's advocate, really, seeing as it's a debate, but organisations set the banding, although Agenda for Change, originally started, you can set your own banding for what you feel that job is. Unfortunately, the whole world is not made up of highly skilled people. The majority are not, who still have to earn a living. If we've got money for all this automation, why haven't we got money to pay these people to work? The money's there, it's just going to a different place. I struggle.
Go on,
that,
Brian.
really.
Brian, you could lead on that.
Well, yeah, thanks. I think there's a golden adage, isn't it? Follow the money. And if we did that a lot more in our national life instead of just local areas, we might find some very interesting things out. But that's going into politics. But if you think about the cost of investing in automation versus the cost of employing, I assume the ratio would be about 3 to 1. So you need 3 people when a robot could work 24/7. So you need 3 people to do 3 shifts and perhaps some extras in case of sickness. So that's how you do the cost-benefit analysis. And so if that, your trust managers are all about managing their budgets, probably less important to the patients. So sorry, any trust managers out there, that's me being cynical. But if
There is
if
an
that,
aspect of that.
yeah, absolutely. If that cost-benefit analysis is in favour of automation, that is the strategy they will follow.
Sanna, anything to add to
Yeah, I'm
that?
just thinking also about the sort of workforce diversification, and if with automation and digitalization, the job roles will change, the skills requirements will change, the training will have to follow, but that would also mean that people would have potentially options to do more diverse roles, more interesting roles, possibly maybe that could impact the retention.
Or
as well.
focus on the tasks that
Yeah,
require
exactly,
a more human touch.
exactly, yeah.
So I think earlier on we saw Rebecca from Partners, and their latest technology that they're looking at is an automated pre-clean device for endoscopy. Now, one of the things I was considering when looking at that you wouldn't necessarily, you could put, let's say, 3 of those units in the place of 1 sink. So arguably you could clean 3 to 6 scopes in the same time as 1 technician can clean 1 scope, right? Now, you don't need to necessarily get rid of the technician, replace them with those machines. But what that does is it allows that technician to have more time to go and do the checks, the balances, the quality assurance on the other areas of the department, so they could spend more time and not feel as rushed as they would if they were stuck at a sink, having scopes thrown at them every 2 seconds with the consultants putting them under pressure. So again, like Brian said, you could have the hybrid model, and I think that's the way we probably should look at it, that automation does have a benefit used correctly, and we can still maintain those staff, but use them more wisely.
I think a thing for me, obviously, if we use automation, we've got conveyors, robots, etc. Where is the expertise coming to actually maintain this? Because, your normal hospital estates are not going to be able to maintain that. You've got specialist equipment. Maintenance is going to come at a premium, in probably the manufacturing plants of, automotives up here in Birmingham. They would probably pay a lot more than NHS or even the private sector in our field. So where would we get, and Brian, we have enough problems with our traditional equipment, never mind adding perhaps another layer onto that engineering commitment. So probably if you were a conveyor that's breaking down all the time, where would that leave us? Rob, I'll ask you as a department manager who is...
Your first protocol is going to be with the supplier, isn't it? That they would have the necessary skills to offer the service and maintenance contract, or else you wouldn't necessarily take that out. But I get from an IHEM perspective, a healthcare engineering oversight of how do we, who monitors that, who gives us the assurance and the governance, because like you say, there's lots of different healthcare estates engineers that provide, like your AEs that support vents and medical gases and decontamination, who are not necessarily going to be well versed in these new conveyors or robotics and things like that. But do they not also need to evolve? Because we've seen IHEM recently release the AE's medical devices, which wasn't previously a thing. So maybe as the industry evolves, so do the regulations and the engineers, and hopefully we can pay them the right amount to retain them within healthcare and not just be private industry, which is another argument about pay that we need to do. Because I know, again, I'm going to go back to my days in Salisbury, so 15, 16 odd years ago, we used to lose our decontamination engineers. We had Porton Down up the road with defence labs, and they were paying a hell of a lot more money than the little Salisbury District Hospital was for our estates engineers. So we got to a stage where we had lots of decontamination engineers validating all our kit. It was a wonderful time. And then almost overnight, they'd all left and gone to Porton Down, and we had nobody that could maintain our kit. So it's not a new challenge. This is not new. It's been going on for 2 decades, probably more.
I think it's a bit like going to work at Sainsbury's. You're just at the opposite end of the scale, so you're prepared to pay them more to keep them, but not the ones that are going to Sainsbury's to keep them.
Well, we're trying. If you know what's happening with the NHSE technical bulletin, where we've upped the banding on the national profile, so all the national profiles for decontamination staff, right from band 2 all the way up to band 8C, they've all been reviewed. NHS employers unfortunately wouldn't engage, so NHS employers had done enough rebanding of job profiles, but on the Institute of Decontamination Sciences, we have the national job profiles for all of those bandings, and we've done it. They've uplifted, so your quality manager now looking at band 6s where they were previously 4s and 5s. Your technicians once qualified at band 3 where they were previously band 2. I'm fortunate in my organisation, we're already band 3 for all our sterile service technicians, but we still want to get them trained up. And we're currently going through a process to up-band our endoscopy technicians who are currently band 2, and the exec board agreed that they should be band 3s on an even keel with all our other decontamination specialists. So we are doing it. It's a slow process. I know we've been talking about it for over 10 years within the Institute. So it does, keeps bubbling up, and we're trying, but we have to just keep going. The same as many years ago they did with radiology. Before, when they weren't recognised and weren't getting the correct pay. So we all have to go through this process.
I suppose the next question, where
John?
could... Sorry.
Comment here.
No, just
Yeah,
I was
Sanna.
just going to ask a question in terms of, well, obviously the cost of retaining and retraining staff. So what is more cost effective, paying the staff more to retain them, or what is the cost of training new staff to the level of people who go? So that would be quite an interesting thing to cost. And what is more cost efficient,
Well,
cost effective for the NHS to do? Is it to pay the existing staff well, rather than start training somebody from scratch?
You would invest more in training, because the whole time that you're training somebody, they're not fully effective. Exactly. So you're paying them the rate of a fully effective operator when they're not. Unfortunately, because it's public spend, it's taxpayers' money, the NHS doesn't have it within their gift like a private company to say, you're really good, I don't want you to leave, I'm going to pay you more. Mm-hmm. We have a limit, and once you're on that banding, that's as much as we're allowed to do.
Sure, but the banding could be, well, as you said, it's been going up.
And that's a long process. Yeah. That's a long process, because it's a huge organisation. Mm-hmm. It's a government institute.
Yeah, of course.
Going back to your talk this morning, John, I think there's a case for a couple more HTMs, one on AI and one on automation.
We can't get these written, never mind. Yeah. Where do you see obvious areas for automation? Within an SST, I suppose conveyors, loading equipment would be the obvious.
Yeah, I think like Brian touched on, the sort of the more menial tasks that are going to reduce the risks to staff. Repetitive tasks that don't require that decision making, if you like, that human touch. So I think that's where we could do it. Obviously, manual tasks, loading, unloading. I'll touch on some other possibilities in a second. But yeah, I think the inspection, I know there's AI now that's coming out and it can identify all the instruments on a tray, but is it at the stage yet where it can do the function test? Can it check that those instruments are working correctly? Because that's going to take some sort of manual manipulation. Are the optics on these AIs modules, are they good enough to spot a hairline crack on a box joint, which a Mark 1 operator would be able to do? So these are the sort of the things that inspection function still has to stay human, still has to have the skill set to be able to do that. Whereas the manual handling, the more mundane, risky tasks, I think that should be going over to the automated side.
I think the manufacturing industry will drive the agenda here in terms of innovation, because if we look around, most of the innovation, certainly in robotics and automation, are coming from commercial suppliers. So if you go around the exhibitions, you'll see these little caddies that will find their way around a department to deliver a set of instruments. I've seen big setups where they will actually fold the flexible sterile barrier systems and wrap trays, and they're obviously designed, commercially designed products that they expect to be able to sell and make a profit on. So I think in the future we will see a lot more innovation coming out of the manufacturing industries. Did any of you see that robot on the news a few weeks ago? I mean, it was totally and utterly humanoid in its characteristics, in the way it moved, in the way it engaged with real people.
Is
So
that called Keir Starmer?
yeah. Well, I think it's the Prince of Darkness. But, you know, you can just envisage a startup company well funded by funding angels that would just say, right, we'll teach that robot to do this certain task in a given area, like an SSD or whatever. So that's the place to look.
Anything from yourself, Sanna?
Yeah,
I know you've made...
like I said, I know very little about the processes, but generally in admin, like administrative side of things, digitalization has the easiest way to come in. So tracking equipment, you'd have these little RDIF little tag, RF, yeah, precisely those tags on equipment that would automatically then be scanned into the system when they come in. So you would know exactly that nobody has left any implements inside somebody when they do an operation or whatever. So that might be one, and they could automatically come into a dashboard. You could see how many pieces of equipment went out and how many have come back. And then just digital administration of whatever the processes are. So I would say those are the easiest ways to bring automation and digitalization in.
Easy.
Well,
Now, RFID crumbs.
Simplest.
I was going to say, yeah, I remember sitting at a conference talking about RFID, this great new thing that was coming in about 2012, probably even before. And is there any instrument manufacturers in the room, or is it just practitioners, decontamination practitioners? So they use RFID on the loan kits that come in. That's quite routine. So there's an RFID scanner within that graphics container. So when it goes back to the factory, passes through a doorway and it's passive, and they recognise that kit's being returned. There was massive amounts of attempts over the years to try and get RFID chips retrofitted to instruments. A lot of pushback from surgeons and consultants, because even something the size of a grain of rice on certain instrumentation, they didn't like how it felt during surgery, so that was poo-pooed. And then there's companies that want to embed them into the surgical instrument, so you can't actually see them, you can't feel them. But many hospitals in the UK have got instruments that have been in that system for 30 plus years. It is a massive undertaking. There's millions and millions of instruments in individual hospitals that would all need to be replacing. And instruments are not cheap, especially the specialist instruments. They are significantly expensive. And trusts are struggling to invest in their current inventory to keep it in good nick for the surgeries and the delivery that they're currently trying to do. Never mind having to replace it all just so they have better tracking.
Okay.
So it's a huge undertaking, and I think the instrument count would probably be into the billions, just in England alone.
And how long can you use a particular instrument for before it's recycled?
Well, I said some of them are in the system. Has anyone still got brass instruments so that they have wooden handles going around your hospitals? I remember them. So there's instruments in there that been 30 plus years.
Okay.
They've got logos on there from companies that have been closed down and disbanded for over 20 years. That's how long they've been in the system. And I think many people in the room, especially in the sterile services, will recognise that. Yeah, Bev definitely does, and Sobi does over at Bath.
Maybe there's an innovation call for something like that then.
It's a huge undertaking, yeah.
I think you're right. It's not quite as straightforward as say automate. You know, there's so many different parts of this. You know, unique identification of instruments. like Rob said.
It's a fantastically interesting process if you start thinking about it from precisely from service innovation and co-design point of view. So maybe this is something that you all guys should consider.
I think everyone has tried to. They would love to go to RFID. I think a lot of people have conceded. I know some of the guys at the back there in Manchester. They actually conceded, and they've gone to instrument marking instead, because although that takes huge amounts of labour time to put these marks on each individual instrument, that's far simpler than it is for RFID chips and far quicker, and it gives them some level of traceability. So again, yeah, all these mechanisms are out there. They've been out there for a very, very long time, but the practicalities of actually embedding them into an organisation, huge cost, huge investment in time, and unfortunately the services don't stop. So the pressure of that patient delivery, that surgical delivery, it doesn't let up.
Yeah.
And these are all service departments, and there's no sterile services that ever says, sorry, we can't do that. They're like, everybody's, yes, we can, and we'll try and do it as quickly as possible, no matter what fast track you throw at us. And that's just how the world works, unfortunately.
I think the automation, and Mark may back me up on this because I think it's your premises, or your AED premises. I think Southmead, they've got automation to bring back and take kit back to the ward. So you've got indirect automation, really. So the organisation, rather than SSD staff leaving the department, the robots take it with them.
AGVs are they called? AGVs, thanks, sir, because I know you were there. You were at Southmead when they went in, weren't you, in 2014? Thank you.
So how did that work, Sophie? Was it perceived a success, or?
Initially, there was massive problem.
Do you want to wait for a mic? I don't know.
No, I can't.
Yeah, okay.
So Soby can project his voice.
There we are, the mic's coming, Sophie. I don't want to spoil this delivery.
So each unit cost around £80,000 at that time. Initially, massive. The issue is that it wasn't properly consulted with the staff. The portering staff, especially, they think it is a threat to their job. So, and again, sometimes human beings and technology won't integrate properly. So, the AGV will go, then, staff may sit in front of. We have seen videos, staff standing on the top of AGV, things like that.
I was going to say, they had to put a sign on top of them. They're telling people not to stand on because the porters were surfing down the corridors on the AGVs.
And again, the cages, if you go to NHS Trust, you can see all the corridor filled with cages, lot of bed, things like that. AGV will go and stop there. I'm coming, move it. I'm coming, move it. It will stop there unless somebody move that cage or...
Yeah.
But if a new hospital, any purpose-built corridor for AGV, it will work perfectly.
That's an interesting point that you've brought that up, because the new hospital programme, all that billions and billions of pounds, and there's 40 hospitals that have been approved to have the complete rebuild. Within the new hospital programme, the outline spec is that they have the AGVs, and Southmead's been the model that's in the NHP that people are following. Now, there's big questions about that. Like Soby says, dedicated corridors for them. The cages and the trolleys that are required for these devices have to be specially made so they can latch onto and pick them up and transport them around the hospital. And one of the questions being asked, if we've got 40 hospitals now, or in 7-10 years' time, if we have 40 hospitals that have got these devices in, and they're all ordering through NHS supply chain, is NHS supply chain providing the stock within those cages? Because if not, does that then mean that we need to employ a whole team of staff to transfer from NHS supply chain deliveries into the AGV cages so that then they can be transported around the hospital? And if this is an NHS initiative, shouldn't supply chain start supplying the new hospitals with kit in those correct transportation modules? So it's a big question with the new hospital programme at the minute.
Yeah, there's just a couple of things I wanted to add with this thing with automation. Now, I agree with what Rob said earlier. When you've got tasks that are for things that, put your staff at risk, like MSD, then I think they're a good idea. But I just think there are too many too many things they couldn't do. First of all, if you're in a hospital that's a teaching hospital, then very often they get funding to do all these kind of things. But your normal NHS trust, you don't get stuff like this. And we spent most of 2025 at 65% staffing, and the trust wouldn't even replace staff that had left in the hospital. So where we'd get the funding for that. But also, my question is that if you've got things like this in there, normally anything that's robotic and automated has to be connected to a network, obviously, to be able to do its job it does. So if you lose those connections or you have problems and you lose that, what does that mean? You've got to wait, a day or 2 days for an engineer to come in. So what do? Cancel the theatre list because you've lost your skilled staff that would do that job.
I think that's one for you, Sanna.
Oh, yeah, I'm kind of thinking on my feet on this. Well, one thing that I could maybe make a parallel to social care, what they have been doing there is they've developed a new role called care technologist, whose job it is to help other members of staff staff and also clients to start using digital technologies as part of their work. So maybe in this kind of hospital context, you could have specific people trained to help other members of staff to either fix things, or they could be a rotating member of staff who can go around hospitals fixing those robots when they break. So it might not be enough workload for one person to work in one hospital to fix robots, but if there was a regional robot engineer who went around hospitals, that might already help in situations like that. Obviously, the network connectivity is the thing that it could happen anywhere, and it does happen. Maybe you need to have people with more diverse skills. They can do both things. So not to forget the manual job while you're already able to do the more advanced digital skills requiring job.
I think
I think it's also, it's when automated systems are doing things. So if you're in a car manufacturing plant, that every single car is made exactly the same way when it comes off. So, robotics things can do that. In a sterile service environment, you've got the robot programmed as it has to be to know exactly how to do the same thing every time, and it's packing the set. But then how's it going to do it if you've got something that's a trauma that's come in, your set has got an instrument missing, but the surgeons can still use it with that. Well, the robot's not going to know that because it's not going to pass it because it's got something missing from the set.
But maybe it's a question of where robotics is implied. So again, this goes back to the co-design process of service, like service redesign with the people who work in the service. So robotics can be many things, and it can be somebody who takes things from A to B, but it can be also, for example, I spoke to one company over there who are developing an automated workflow for identifying, I'm not probably telling this, but quality controlling cleanliness of instruments using photonics. So photonics is the science where the light can kind of indicate that there's still some grime left in a tool, even if human eye can't see it. So if there were that kind of processes, so humans put things in, calculate them, take them out, carry them places, but they are like, where in the workflow is robotics or automation, where does it sit best, and where is it most meaningful for the process to work well? And I think that is where you guys need to be involved in the redesign and digitalization of your service rather than just plugging in something. Like if you have a service that's been working like this for the past 10 years or 15 years and then you bring in a robot, of course it's not going to work. Of course there are going to be some glitches, but if you are involved in the process and thinking where can we bring these efficiencies in best using technology, then it's going to work much better for everybody involved.
Brian?
Well, I picked up on a comment that was made over there about cloud storage and the control of maybe robotics through cloud. I used to be involved in a product where we did a test, uploaded the results to the cloud and kept the data for the hospital. The IT department would periodically decide to do a purge of non-recognised programs over the weekend, and on Monday morning it didn't work. So I think there are still IT issues involved, unless things have dramatically changed, with having too much interaction with cloud and the possibilities of confidential information being transferred to the wrong places.
Okay, last question. What could AI mean in terms of improving standards within an SSD?
Well, I'll have a stab at that because, again,
You said these
it
questions,
was
not me.
hinted on at this morning that AI could be used to monitor the sterilisation processes and do predictive maintenance requests. And this is something that I believe personally is quite possible now. I know that some steriliser manufacturers have built into their equipment links to their headquarters so that they can monitor, with your permission of course, the performance of the sterilisers and tell you that that machine needs a new pump, or you talked about the pump and hearing it scream, but again that kind of information can be detected instrumentally, and they would contact you and say, well, we need to come in and fit a new pump, or a new valve is rattling a bit, or this kind of thing, or your sterilisation temperature is starting to drift in the wrong direction, so we need to come in and do some corrective maintenance. So I think this is where AI is going to look at the big data that is generated by all our monitoring systems and start to learn how to make predictions about how that equipment is going to behave in the future.
What about taking that a bit further, not just the big data, looking at sort of daily operational tests and maybe weekly ACTs. Again, freeing up engineer time to go and focus on more complex repairs. Yeah. Instead of standing in front of a washer or steriliser with a stopwatch, could AI be used to monitor that and say, yeah, okay, this machine's good to use for today, the weekly's been ticked off, and things like that. And I think we talked about that. I know there's a robot coming out in China that looks at a tray of instruments and says within 60 seconds that every single instrument off that set list is now present. That could be used for theatre start, theatre finish, and your sterile surfaces wash checks. I wouldn't recommend putting that as the inspection process in the clean room, because there's like I said before, there's other aspects that the technicians need to do where they actually have to manipulate those instruments before signing them off and releasing that pack back to the end user. So, but I think for those initial inspections where you want to verify that what we started surgery with, we've ended up with, and there's nothing that's been retained within the patient, and the backstop for that, which is the initial check in the wash area to make sure that everything's been returned from theatres and it's not been retained in the patient. I think that could speed up the process, because those are the areas where we're seeing devices and kits and trays that it's coming in en masse, and people are under a lot of pressure to try and do a really robust check on multiple items, and well, like I say, while the pressure's on. So that would alleviate the pressure, allow the staff to do the job correctly, and focus more on the things that they need to focus on, rather than something that AI could take the place for.
I've got a question for the audience to think about, and that is, John mentioned the ACT this morning, and that is dependent on an trained individual, an engineer, standing in front of the machine and observing its performance. And I think nowadays we can replace him actually making notes about what he observes with data capture. But John mentioned the fact that you can't get, at the minute anyway, AI to listen to the machine, see the whispers of steam coming out of the door seal, hear that clanking noise as the valve opens and closes. So, and it's the same with aviation. The pilot always goes round his plane before he takes off in it. So it's a case of, do we believe we need a human to stand in front of our equipment and observe how it's performing, or are we happy to hand that over to automated monitoring systems, however good or bad they are?
So what about the engineering applications that Brian indicated, door seal leaks and pumps and, door interlocks banging and clanging?
That can include to the daily test a technician can do. We don't need an engineering ability to do that sort of things.
What about your door interlock?
We don't need an engineer.
So what about...
I mean, it's got really controversial.
What about your door interlocks then?
But the problem is that there is no independent IMS. They all telling that it's sort of an independent monitoring system, but that is
There is if you install an independent IMS.
So can AI verify the door interlock? bearing in mind doors do blow off from
Otherwise,
time
the
to
cycle
time.
won't start in the first place, isn't it?
Well, it could go, you know, the limit switches could become damaged or defective.
And even then, engineers not checking every cycle anyway.
Yeah.
Perhaps AI could if it was inbuilt from the
Sobe, are
start.
you proposing that we just disband IHEAM?
No. I mean, we need people like you for expert advice, you know.
Who's your AD?
When
And
we are
doing good talks.
Is that why Jim's not in the room? Is it?
When's your next JAG audit due?
Would you get in a plane that the pilot hadn't inspected?
I fly Ryanair all the time.
no,
I'll fed you the line.
Come on in, Sam.
would.
You've been quiet today.
Pilot knows how to fly the plane. He's not going to be experiencing where that crack is there, making sure the door's on there. He's probably waiting to say, come on, we've got to get this plane off the ground now in the slot. What I want to just say here now is that you have key specialist individuals, such as pilots, AEDs, etc. And I get what you say about that door, John, and that's a fear of mine of, you know, knocking a couple of staff out with the door blowing off or whatever. But I'm an infection control nurse, but also a decontamination manager. And there are 3 groups of people in the hospital setting that can cause the most damage to the most patients, and that is catering, your cleaners, and HSDU. And they are the most lowest paid staff going. So I think, first of all, that there needs to be some form of revisiting that. I do think there's a place for AI in inspection, visual, sensing heat whizzing out the door frames and all that lot. I'm not an expert, John, you know that, I'm a nurse. But if they can do it with Paddy McGuinness on Inside the Factory on Burton's Biscuits, so your jammy Dodgers are perfect, with Beryl on the line pulling out the odd ones, so you've got someone overseeing. I think it's a two-way thing. We need a multi-pronged approach. You need to be paying staff more. You'll still get your pens on a tray. All right, you'll still get that. You'll still get maybe they haven't been moved. I get the bit about manipulation of certain instruments. There is a place. And a robotic eye, there are robots out there who are able to detect visually, as you said, San, about cracks, organic matter, that may be better than Beryl who's off for a cup of tea in 5 minutes. And that is a fact. I think we need to do it as a multi-pronged approach, and not just about the manual handling bit, but we need to revisit. These staff are well underpaid, and I also think culturally they are not valued as much as they should be. So whoever's works in those, thank you very much for what you do.
I think Sam has summarised that perfectly.
Yeah.
I think we'll leave that there.